What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for joining me today. It was officially day one of Packers rookie minicamp. Always exciting this time of year because you get through the draft, and this is our very first opportunity to actually get a really good look at some of these players in person. I'll be totally transparent. This was mostly a nondescript practice. We were only there as a media for about 4 sessions total, one of which was stretching. So it's not like we were able to get a massive feel for who these players are and were, etc. But overall, it was just nice to see these players in person and kind of get our first impressions. We'll be back there tomorrow on Saturday breaking that down as well. But overall, there were 48 players at rookie minicamp. A lot of these are obviously headlined by your rookie class and your undrafted free agents. You've got some players that have not met the playing time threshold yet that can be there. Guys like a Tyler Goodson and Danny Etling, Bo Melton, etc. And then, of course, you've got your tryout players as well. So 48 players in total. Only one player was not practicing, and that was Grant Dubose. He was off to the sideline. And this makes sense, right? If you're going to sign an undrafted free agent or bring a guy in for a tryout, you're probably making sure that they're 100% healthy, because if they're already off to a injured start, that's not a great way to start off your career as an undrafted guy, or certainly as a tryout player. So would not make sense for a lot of those guys to already start on the injured list. It would have to probably be somebody that they selected. And in this case, it was 7th round pick Grant Dubose. Hopefully he's back sooner rather than later. No update on what that actual injury is as of yet, but he did not practice on Friday. As far as what we go over today, I'm expecting that this is going to be a fairly short episode. The biggest thing I can tell you is not to jump to any conclusions. I know that we just got done with the draft and immediately we get into our draft grades and breaking down these players. And then this is our first opportunity to see these players in person. And the reason I wanted to do this episode is because I'm very fortunate in that I'm actually one of the very rare few people that actually gets to be there on these days. And I feel like I should, at least give you my observations, if nothing else. But I also don't want to be like, all right, let's fire up the hot take machine and let's get these things started and let's go over some really bold takes. This was a very nondescript practice overall. Again, 4 sessions in total. It started off with some special teams drills, then it was stretching, then you had some sort of ball security and or I guess more fundamental drills, and then finally in that 4th session, you got into some individual drills and some quarterbacks throwing to receivers and tight ends and those sort of things. So overall, that 4th session was a little bit more informative and could actually see some of the players in action, but this was a mostly nondescript practice, at least the portion that was open to the media. And by the way, this was a shrunken down session for the media. In the past, we got to see a ton of that rookie mini camp, at least practice 1. We'll see what practice 2 brings. In this session, they just said that we were only able to attend the first 4 sessions of that practice and then closed it down to the media from there. So we didn't get quite the look that we were normally used to in previous years. We'll see if that continues to be the case on Saturday and moving forward, but that was a little bit of an interesting note as well. Maybe one of the other interesting notes before I get into my observations was maybe one of the key people missing was not a player. It was Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur was down in Madison for I think it was a cancer benefit held by Greg Gard, the Badgers basketball coach. And I think this is interesting in the fact that he felt comfortable going down on day 1 of rookie minicamp. Maybe somebody's going to make a big deal out of this. I think this is not a story at all. If there's anything to take away from this, I think it's how much Matt LaFleur trusts Rich Bisaccia. And Rich Bisaccia led practice on Friday and got the opportunity to sort of, put his fingerprints on everything. And for any of those, wondering, Rich Bisaccia was the interim head coach for the Raiders and was a legitimate head coaching candidate for the Colts. Ask any player that has played for him. Aaron Rodgers has spoken about it on the Pat McAfee show. Many others have spoken out about it in the past. There were a lot of Raiders that were upset that Rich Bisaccia did not get the job and that it went to Josh McDaniels instead when that job was open. There are a multitude of players who have been, involved in a Rich Bisaccia team that feel like he should and could be, would be, whatever, a potential head coach in the NFL. And I think this is Matt LaFleur saying, hey, I've got something going on. Rich, it's your show. You take it. And I have total trust. And, you can totally run this thing the way as you seem fit. And I think, again, that's a more of a vote of confidence in Rich than it is a story about Matt LaFleur not being at day 1 of rookie minicamps. And Matt's going to be back on day 2. He'll speak to the media on day 2 as well. So we'll get some feedback from Matt, after day 2 of minicamp. But as far as those are maybe wondering of like, oh my goodness, Matt LaFleur wasn't even there for day one of rookie minicamps. I don't think that this is a story. And like I said, if anything, it is a huge vote of confidence in Rich Bisaccia and his capabilities of leading a football team. He is a more than capable, in my opinion, head coach in the NFL. And the Packers are very blessed that they have him as an assistant head coach, obviously special teams coordinator. And they, that Matt gave him that autonomy to lead that practice. So that was kind of, in my opinion, that was kind of a cool story that it was Rich's practice. And no shocker whatsoever. And maybe Rich had no say in this. Maybe Matt had everything to do with this, but no shocker whatsoever that the very first drills in rookie mini camps 2023 were Rich Bisaccia's special teams drills. And this just is like been the offseason of Rich Bisaccia. If you look at all the players that were re-signed or signed in the offseason so far, all of them have some sort of special teams connection. Even like every single draft pick for the most part has some special teams connection. Guys in the 7th round, Anthony Johnson and Carrington Valentine were definitely huge special teams players. But even guys like Lucas Van Ness had a couple punt blocks. Like you go right down the list. Jaden Reed had 3 punt returns for touchdowns. I think it was Luke Musgrave had a blocked punt. Like I think it was Colby Wooden who had a field goal block. Like you see special teams written all over this entire offseason. So fitting that Rich Bisaccia would be the coach on Friday, and more than fitting that the very first drill and the very first practice of 2023 would be a special teams drill. All right, as far as my observations, number one, and this is really what this is about, at least from my standpoint, is it's a first impression. It's just like what jumps off the page to you, just sort of scanning the field for these 48 players, what stands out. And the very first thing that stands out is Lucas Van Ness. If you want to have a conversation of like who looks the part on day one, it is Lucas Van Ness through and through. We knew that this is a player nicknamed Hercules that was built, and you see all the pictures. Man, the pictures don't do it justice. This guy is absolutely yoked. He looks the part. He is a, if you want to talk about like just chiseled physique and like everything that you want, that's him. Like he fits the build to a absolute T. And, he looks like a NFL edge rusher from day one. And maybe that's like, well, yeah, Andy, he just got drafted as a, player, as an edge rusher in the NFL. I would hope he looks the part. One of my biggest takeaways from last year, at this same time last year, was Kingsley Keke and Kingsley Enagbare. And Kingsley Enagbare not exactly, filling out his build at that point of like, okay, this guy might take a little bit of time to fill out physically and put on some functional strength. Like, don't expect him to just come in and be a powerhouse on day one. Like, he's going to take some time. In the past, Jake Hansen in his rookie season, 6th round pick when he got selected, he looks like a JV player trying to play varsity, or maybe even a freshman player trying to play varsity his first season. A little bit undersized. Like sometimes these players, drafted or not drafted, you can tell right away of like, oh, it's going to take some time for them to build out that frame and put on some functional strength. With Lucas Van Ness, that is not the case. He looked ready to play week one, top tier NFL edge rusher from day one. And that's a positive takeaway. Do we get to see him against offensive tackles in one-on-ones or in team drills? No. Do I have any sort of real feel that he's going to be this amazing edge rusher? No. But one of the best things that you can have as a first impression is looking the part, and Lucas Van Ness 1,000,000% looked the part. If you could scan, again, the field of 48 players, it does not take you long to find Lucas Van Ness and say, oh, yeah, that's probably their first round pick because he's just built a little bit different. He just has a little bit of a different feel to him. So it's important to pass that eye test. And it's a great feeling to have when you take somebody, top 15, where you get him in and you're like, okay, as advertised, he hasn't let himself go over the, past few weeks before the draft, whatever the case may be. Like I said, he came in ready to play, looked the part, and that will be an exciting progression for him moving forward. My other big takeaway was the tight ends were certainly as advertised. And that comes, first of all, with Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. I want to start with Luke Musgrave because when we talk about a player jumping off the page, Luke Musgrave jumps off the page for his height and his size, and you notice him immediately. But then there's the movement traits. He is an extremely clean mover when he gets out of his stance, when he is just doing drills, when he's jogging around. Like, you can just tell, like, there is a poetry in motion of watching Luke Musgrave in person. Those traits that we saw on tape that we talked about, yeah, there's limited productivity, and go back and listen to my entire deep dive scouting report from him. Yes, there's going to be some things that he's going to have to work on and probably put on some functional strength. But what jumped off the tape when you watched him was his movement skills, and you're like, okay, this guy has some very unique traits as a move tight end, probably going to be a little bit of a mismatch piece. Again, that's something that you're hoping to see as soon as you see him in person. And as much as it jumped off the tape, it jumped off as you're watching him in practice. If you're just scanning the field and being like, all right, who am I going to keep an eye on? Luke Musgrave once again jumps out as somebody of like, oh, I want to kind of just, I don't really want to watch any of the other 47 guys. I just kind of want to keep watching Luke Musgrave because you could tell the movement skills, you could tell how fast he was, and a very, fun story and just sort of highlighting this. Cameron McDonald, one of the players that was in camp, in rookie minicamp, I should say, they're doing just these drills off the line and they're just, kind of getting out of their stance and sprinting down the field or whatever. Cameron McDonald's looking at, Luke Musgrave and being like, oh, he's like, you got some speed. He's like, you got some speed, man. Like you could tell he was impressed of like, oh, this guy's different. And there were, with both Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave, you could just tell from some of the comments on the field and just, hearing the media talking of, just these two guys, their movement traits and what they are going to bring to the tight end room, a little bit more speed, a little bit more run after the catch ability. You could just tell it from day one. And that's, like I said, an exciting aspect of well. And that moves us into Tucker Kraft, who is basically same thing, right? Like this guy is built like an absolute tight end is supposed to be built, and he has some really fun movement skills as well. You can see him quickly get out of his stance. You can see him catch the ball, immediately accelerate out of that catch, which is something that Luke Musgrave did as well. And again, I want to emphasize this is in shorts in the Don Hutson Center in early May. This isn't crowning anyone. We're not saying that anyone's going to become a first team All-Pro on their very first rookie mini camp practice in shorts, by the way, for Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave, but for any of these guys. But again, it's always positive when you can see these guys in person and they can kind of jump off the page a little bit. And that was exactly the case with both Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. And you could tell the coaches were excited to see both of those guys. You could tell their movement skills, and both of them are going to be very fun players to watch through the remainder of this offseason and hopefully for their careers as members of the Green Bay Packers. And then the other one I'll highlight too, as somebody that just stands out a little bit, was Austin Allen, the tight end. Now, no play. I can't say like, oh yeah, he had a great catch over the middle and individual. There was nothing like that. But he is a huge dude. He is a massive, massive dude. Austin Allen is somebody, when I watched him, I thought for sure would be like a 5th round pick, somewhere in that range. Was super surprised when he went undrafted. He goes undrafted, and I'm like, this is one of the top undrafted free agents in all of football. The Giants pick him up. I thought he was going to make the Giants 53. He gets released. As soon as he gets released, I'm like, they're going to immediately sign him back to the practice squad. They didn't, in which case I'm like, well, somebody else is going to pick him up right away. They didn't. Nobody else did. Finally, the Packers picked him up around, I think, middle of season last year as a practice squad tight end. He obviously carries that over into this year, was able to attend the rookie mini camps here and, and just be present in this and continue his growth. But he is a massive tight end. When I watched him in college, he's got some good run after the catch ability, little bit of ability up the seam, huge dude, massive catch radius. In person, he looks the part very much so as a big seam stretching potential tight end. So he's going to have to work on his blocking just based on his scouting report coming out of college. And I'm sure that that's something that's going to be a focus of his moving forward. He's got great size, but that is another player at rookie minicamp where if you're just scanning the field, Austin Allen definitely going to, stand out to you just based on his size alone. So tight ends were looking the part and certainly stood out in a practice that again was mostly just sort of first impressions. Tyler Goodson's another one where I just want to say I love watching this guy practice. You can tell he doesn't take any moment for granted. Like just even like a simple like swing pass drill. Like he's taking that swing pass drill, he's running through it, he's sprinting down the field, he's like doing a little bit of a juke and a cut move like halfway down the field, like just working on everything that he can and going 110% at all times. What that amounts to is he going to end up making the roster as a number 3 running back. He's going to have some competition from Patrick Taylor and from Lou Nichols, a player that they spent a 7th round pick on. And we know how Goody doesn't like to, cut his draft picks. So he's going to have a battle ahead of him. This is no commentary. I'm like, oh man, Tyler Goodson's going to be this amazing NFL player. But I just love the way that he practices, his intensity and his attention to detail. It goes a long way. And I'm like, this is a player that I really liked coming out of Iowa, as a, potential late round pick. Green Bay picks him up as an undrafted free agent. Had a really nice preseason, really nice preseason. Thought there was a chance that he was going to make the roster. Ends up making the practice squad for the entirety of the year. If I had to guess, that's probably his fate again this year, unless he balls out. Maybe another team takes a flyer on him, or maybe he does win that number 3 running back spot. But this is a player that I'm still very interested in, has great speed, takes his job seriously, and is somebody that I'm going to be keeping an eye on through rookie minicamps, OTAs, minicamps, and training camp. Let's talk about my undrafted free agent that I was immediately caught off guard by. As you guys know, I love these undrafted free agents. I always love finding my guy. Some of my guys in the past have been Tim Boyle, Raven Green, Alex Light. There's been a variety of these guys throughout the course of time in Green Bay. And, immediately a guy that jumps off the page for me is Benny Sapp III. And this is just a immediate he looks built like a safety. Like he looks like what you're supposed to look like as a top end safety in this day and age. And he just sort of stood out to me. And again, I'm not going to say like, oh yeah, you have this diving catch or like this is again, him, practicing with tackling dummies and things like that. But certain things as you've done, when you've done this long enough, certain things are just going to kind of catch your eye. Just his size, his intensity, the way that he kind of went about practice was just something that immediately caught my eye. And when you're starting to look at undrafted guys, you're looking at guys that, all right, how did this guy get overlooked? When I'm watching these guys in person, if you would have asked me, if I didn't know anything about these players, if I didn't know who was who or what was what, and this was like my first day ever watching football, and you said, Andy, who are the 5 or 6 guys that were drafted out of this class just by looking at them? Lucas Van Ness would have been one of those guys. Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, all of those guys would have stood out. Benny Sapp would have probably been on my list. Like I would have been like, yeah, that guy was definitely drafted. And again, this is just an in-person, first impression sort of thing. But sometimes that stuff goes a long way as to how they're built, how they look, how they move on the field. And for me, Benny Sapp was a guy that stood out, and he's going to be a player that I kind of keep an eye on moving forward. Another one is Sean Clifford. This is a fun day from Sean Clifford. I thought he spun the ball really well. And if you remember what I said when they took him and I had the opportunity to break down a little bit of his tape, I'm looking forward to his deep dive coming up, by the way, so keep an eye out for that. But if you took away the results, all right, if you took away like even like if you watched him under center, 5-step drop, 7-step drop, watched his arms, arm talent, watched how he, was mobile in the pocket, watched his footwork, like those sort of things. If you just watch that, if you just watched him get through his, motion and everything like that, and then pause the tape and didn't look at anything else, you would watch him and be like, yeah, that guy's a good quarterback. He's really good. Now the results, sometimes the decision making, the accuracy, some things like that in college did not, really do him justice, and was really the reason why a lot of people had an undrafted grade on him and thought that Green Bay maybe reached on him with a 5th round pick. This was another example of, we don't know what he's going to be. And some of the tape at Penn State was not the greatest for him. But when you just watch him, and you just sort of watch his mobility, when you watch his footwork, when you watch his, how he kind of commands, not a huddle, but like the line of scrimmage, he was barking out the cadence already. Like he's an impressive dude, and he spun the football really well. Now, how that equates moving forward, it will remain to be seen. But that's another player where if you told me that's the backup quarterback for the Packers this year at a first glance, I would have been like, yeah, all right, I could see that. He kind of fits the bill. Now, I'm not saying again that he's just going to be this awesome quarterback or anything like that, but it's a player that spun the ball well, took command of the offense when he needed to in that early practice, and I was impressed by. I thought he had a really nice practice. Threw a couple deep balls really nice, and I'm going to be interested to see how he progresses through the offseason as well. As far as Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed, a couple of other these guys, didn't get a massive look at everyone. Obviously, there's 48 guys there. There's only 4 sessions. I thought Wicks and Reed both had some impressive catches. I thought both of them looked the part. I thought both of them moved really well. Just not a lot of opportunity to see exactly what those guys are capable of. Posted a couple videos of them on my Twitter page, again, at Andy Herman NFL, so you can check those out there. And then last but not least is Lou Nichols. I thought Lou Nichols had a nice day. You could tell that one cut and up mentality that he has. He showed that off, had a couple nice catches in the individual drills as well, catching from, the 2 quarterbacks and right along the sideline. So good hands, good build, good vision, just kind of went about his business. He's another guy that kind of looked the part a little bit as maybe like a number 3 running back option. So those are my overall observations. And if they're a little bit underwhelming and, you're like, you were waiting for some huge breaking thing, it just wasn't that type of practice. Like I said, this was your opportunity, or at least my opportunity, to just kind of get first impressions of these players, see who stood out, see who really caught your eye. And those are kind of the players that caught my eye in day 1 of rookie minicamp. I'm going to be there right back on Saturday, and seeing anything else that stands out, and I'll bring another report for you tomorrow and see where we kind of go from there. But hoping we get to a little bit better look in, maybe than 4 sessions on Saturday, and hoping we can see maybe a little bit more, I don't know, maybe some team drills, some things like that, and we can get a little bit of a better look at some of these players. But either way, just sort of fun to unwrap some of these presents, finally get to see them in person following a really exciting draft. I thought, overall, the group on day one, as much as they possibly could, lived up to the hype of a really positive draft class for Brian Gutekunst. And this was just their first impressions as well, and their first, time practicing inside the Don Hutson Center. And I thought these guys handled themselves well. And like I said, I'm really excited to track them moving forward. So overall, very positive first impressions for this rookie draft class. That's going to do it for me today. Always appreciate you guys. I'll be right back here tomorrow with another breakdown. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.